I'm not cold, leave me alone. I won't hand this child over to someone bad like you. On the evening when a major cold wave was reported on the news, I was hurrying home. That's when I happened to spot my niece, but something about her seemed off. For some reason, she wasn't wearing her coat, just carrying it in her arms. Looking closer at what she was holding, I was shocked to see it was a baby. Moreover, both my niece and the baby looked unusually thin and their clothes were dirty. In this cold, where are you going with a baby? Unable to ignore my shivering niece, I offered to let her rest at my house for a bit. As soon as she saw me, she snapped at me angrily. Shut up! Who says I'm going to your house? I have a bad relationship with my sister, and her daughter, my niece, dislikes me as well. Still, her rejection was stronger than I expected, which took me aback. But under the cold sky, I felt it was dangerous to leave my niece and the baby alone. Trying to sound as gentle as possible and smiling, I invited my niece to my house, but she firmly refused. Mom said to never trust you. You're a good-for-nothing. My niece wouldn't take my hand, ignoring everything I said, and kept resisting with her faltering body. What should I do? How can I help them? While I was internally panicking but still trying to persuade my niece, a car unexpectedly pulled up right beside us. Shocked at what might be happening next, I was astonished to see my husband stepping out of the car. Well, no choice then, I'll have to take her by force. He simply said, and before we knew it, he swiftly picked up my niece, baby and all, and quickly placed them inside the car. Hurry up and get in, he urged me, and as I scrambled into the passenger seat, he started the car somewhat roughly. I protested his forceful action, akin to a kidnapping, but he drove on without a word. The place we eventually arrived at left me breathless. My name is Maple. I'm a typical 29-year-old housewife, born and raised in an ordinary family and married to an ordinary man. I have an older sister by 2 years. I don't recall our relationship being particularly bad during our childhood. Though we had our fights occasionally, we also played together, just an average pair of siblings. However, after becoming adults and getting married, my sister changed. The man she married was what you would call wealthy. He drove a luxury car, wore high-end watches, and was always dressed in stylish suits. Influenced by her husband's values, my sister's spending became extravagant after getting married. She started buying high-end clothes and accessories one after another, and even for daily groceries, she would only shop at upscale supermarkets. Not only that, but she began to look down on me and our parents, calling us poverty-stricken. Moreover, my sister and her husband lived in the town next to ours, and she would boast about her house at every opportunity, which honestly got annoying. Ah, living in an apartment is something only poor people do, how pitiful. If you had married a rich man like I did, you could have lived in a spacious and beautiful house like mine. This house is super comfortable, well worth the $1 million we spent on it. Every time we met, my sister would flaunt her wealth, and my irritation grew until one day I finally snapped. Enough! Always talking about money, it's so annoying. I'm happy with my house and my life. Stop interfering! As I screamed at her, red-faced and nearly lunging forward, she snorted and laughed. Oh, you must be jealous, aren't you? Oh no, the jealousy of the poor is so unseemly. Seeing my sister looking down and mocking me, I came to despise her deeply in my heart. Following that incident, my sister's snide remarks escalated. Even at family gatherings at our parents' house, she would deliberately mock me and my husband. Is that all your husband makes? So little, he must be an incompetent regular employee. Oh, is that why you have to work part-time? Wow, that's sad. Your wedding was really cheap, wasn't it? It was almost all family there. In contrast, look at ours. Our ceremony was lavish. We had 100 guests, and the dress, venue, and food were all top-notch. If only you could have married up like I did. My greedy sister even tried to take my necklace once. It was the only branded item I owned, a treasure gifted by my husband for my birthday. But it seemed my sister couldn't stand me owning a brand item. How dare a poor person like you wear branded goods? Actually, it doesn't suit you at all, it's a pity for the necklace. It would look much better on me, so hand it over. In the end, she didn't manage to take the necklace, but she tore the chain, and I quietly cried, feeling as though she had destroyed a memory shared with my husband. After that incident, I started to ignore my sister completely, feeling nothing but discomfort whenever we met. In avoiding her, I also decided to distance myself from her family. However, my brother-in-law was always busy with work and frequently on business trips, so we seldom saw each other anyway. Even when we did meet, in stark contrast to my chatty sister, my brother-in-law was a man of few words, and we hardly ever spoke. Nevertheless, being influenced by my sister who flaunted her wealth, I came to view my brother-in-law as someone who was also likely to boast about being wealthy. My sister and her husband have a 9-year-old daughter named Susan, who also seems to dislike me and my husband. I don't think we've done anything to warrant such disdain from her, but every time we meet, she glares at us, and even when spoken to, she hardly responds. While I've grown distant from my sister's family, and it's not particularly an issue, being treated coldly even by my niece does make me feel a bit sad. So, while I have managed to cut ties with my sister and her family, I often hear about my sister's activities through a neighbor who works part-time at the same place as me. According to them, my sister recently gave birth to her second child. In between being busy with childcare, she seems to be living happily, indulging in her favorite brands. On one peaceful day, having no interactions with my sister, leading a calm life, I encountered an unexpected incident. It was in the dead of winter when the news was all about an incoming severe cold wave. With snow expected to start falling, I headed to the local supermarket to finish up some shopping. It was incredibly cold, as the news had warned, and I was walking briskly with my scarf pulled up to my nose. Then, on my way, I happened to spot my niece, Susan. Before Susan noticed me, I thought about quickly leaving. However, something about her seemed off, catching my attention. Strangely, she wasn't wearing her coat, just holding it in her arms. Looking closer at what she was carrying, I realized it was a baby, to my surprise. Moreover, both Susan and the baby looked unnaturally thin and their clothes were dirty. She was walking with her nose bright red, clutching the coat tightly around the baby as if to protect it from the cold. Clearly struggling and shivering from the cold herself. "Susan, where are you going in this cold with a baby? Come on, at least come to my place to warm up for a bit." I couldn't just ignore her and called out to my niece. Startled by my voice, she jumped and then, upon seeing me, started yelling at me aggressively. "Shut up! Who says I'm going to your house?" Though I knew she disliked me, her vehement rejection took me aback. But under such cold conditions, I felt it was dangerous to leave her and the baby alone. "But you must be cold without your coat on, right? Let's warm up at my place for a bit. Then, I can take you home, okay?" I tried to speak to my niece with the gentlest tone and a smile, but she was adamant in her refusal. "It's not cold, just leave me alone. I have to protect this baby. I won't hand them over to someone bad like you." "I wouldn't hurt you or the baby, I promise." "Lies. Mom said to never trust you." Despite my attempts to reach out, my niece wouldn't grab my hand and refused to listen to anything I said, continuing to resist with her unsteady body. I was internally panicking, wondering how I could possibly help them when suddenly a car pulled up right beside us. To my surprise, it was my husband who got out of the car. "Well, no choice then, I guess I'll have to take you by force." Saying just that, he quickly picked up my niece, baby and all, and placed them in the car. "Maple, hurry up and get in," he urged, and as I rushed into the passenger seat, he started the car with a bit of roughness. "Just stay calm, and I won't harm you. Please, don't make a fuss," he said nonchalantly, not even looking at my niece. As for my niece, perhaps intimidated by my husband's firmness or the suddenness of being brought into the car, she became quiet, a stark contrast to her previous behavior. However, she looked so pale and weak that she seemed like she might collapse at any moment. My husband took us, including my niece and the baby, straight to the hospital. Lost in confusion, my niece and the baby were taken away by a nurse. While waiting for their examination to finish, I asked my husband, "Hey, what's all this about? Why were you there just now? And why rush to the hospital of all places?" His forceful action, almost akin to kidnapping, made me slightly confrontational, but he responded with a wry smile. "It was pure coincidence that I was there, just happened to pass by on my way home from work. I was curious about what you were arguing about, but more than that, Susan and the baby looked terribly pale. I just thought we needed to get them to a warm place right away." He initially thought our home would suffice for warmth, but was alarmed by their unnaturally light weight when he picked them up. Fearing that their poor complexion wasn't just due to the cold but possibly due to illness, he instinctively decided to head not home but to a hospital that could provide appropriate care. Although being suddenly put in the car was a shock, if my husband hadn't shown up and it was just me, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Reflecting on it, his actions, while abrupt, were immensely appreciated. Eventually, it seemed the examination for my niece and the baby was complete, and my husband and I were informed about their condition by the doctor. Apparently, both were suffering from malnutrition and were now receiving 4 drips while resting in warm beds. Aside from malnutrition, there appeared to be no other abnormalities, providing us some initial relief. However, the situation of a 9-year-old wandering outside without any adult supervision, carrying a malnourished infant, raised suspicions of neglect. When we informed the doctor that we were not fully aware of the circumstances, he immediately reported the situation to the police. About 30 minutes later, after the 4 had finished and my niece woke up, we had a chance to talk to her. Whether it was the hospital environment or the warmth of the place that calmed her down, my niece was no longer in her previous state of total refusal and was willing to engage in a normal conversation. According to her, my sister, her mother, was currently away on a trip with friends and not at home. Likewise, my brother-in-law was absent due to his usual business trips. During my sister's absence, she had left the entire care of the baby to my niece with the instruction, "You take care of it." However, without any specific guidance, my niece had been trying to care for the baby by imitating what she had seen her mother do. Amidst this, the baby's complexion turned pale, and it started crying inconsolably. Unable to calm the baby down, my niece decided to take the baby to the hospital. She used her only coat to wrap the baby for warmth and set out for the hospital despite the cold. I stumbled upon my niece during that journey. Had we not found them, my niece and her siblings might have frozen to death by now. Realizing this possibility made me shiver. That must have been tough. By the way, why did you have such an aversive attitude towards my wife? My husband casually inquired, and my niece awkwardly averted her gaze as she responded. Apparently, from a young age, my sister had instilled in her the lie that I was a bad person. She told my niece, "I was bullied by my sister since we were kids. She's a bad person, so you must never get close to her." Of course, that was a lie from my sister, but to a child, a mother's words are everything. Without verifying the truth, my niece grew up believing I was the enemy who bullied her mother. However, witnessing how my husband and I earnestly tried to help them this time made her question what she had been told by her mother. "Is what Mom said true? Were you bullying her?" My niece asked with sincere eyes, and I shook my head in response. "Your mom and I got along when we were kids. If you don't believe me, you should ask Grandma and Grandpa." Moved by my answer, my niece tearfully bowed deeply. "I'm sorry for being so defiant when you were just trying to help. I'm sorry for hating you all this time because I believed what Mom said." Understanding the reason my niece had always disliked us brought me relief, but also a strong anger towards my sister. According to my niece, my sister wouldn't be back until tomorrow, so we decided to take care of my niece and her siblings for the night. After apologizing, my niece seemed to feel lighter and started to engage in normal conversations with us, albeit still a bit awkwardly. Feeling her becoming more comfortable, I asked her about her daily life while we were eating dinner at our house. It turned out that even before the baby was born, my niece often had to stay home alone. During those times, My sister neither prepared meals in advance nor gave her money for food, leaving my niece to go hungry. I felt a simmering anger towards my sister's selfish actions. After ensuring my niece and the baby were fed and had fallen asleep, I called my parents to plan revenge on my sister. The next day, my husband and I took my niece and her siblings to my sister's house. My parents were already waiting there, and my mother rushed to embrace my niece and her siblings the moment she saw them. "You've had a tough time, haven't you? You did well." Held by my mother, my niece quietly shed tears. Then, we decided to wait for my sister's return. While leaving my niece with my mother, I went around the neighborhood to inquire about my sister's behavior. When I shared that she had been neglecting my niece and the baby to go out, most of the neighbors were outraged and shared their observations of my sister's usual cold treatment towards my niece, including frequently yelling at her. Also, having learned that my sister was expected to return home sometime after noon today, I waited for her with my parents. I tried calling my sister's cell to inform her that we had taken care of my niece overnight and that we were waiting for her return at her house, but as expected, she did not answer. So, ignoring my sister's lack of response, I continued to wait for her return at the entrance of her house, together with my parents. After a while, my sister arrived back home with a few friends.
"What? Why are you here? And Mom and Dad too? What do you want?"
Upon seeing me, my sister immediately showed her displeasure without trying to hide it. I stared back at her without backing down and said, "Last night, we found Susan walking with the baby and took care of them. I tried contacting you many times, but you never noticed, did you? There should have been numerous missed calls from not only me but also the police and our parents regarding this matter." Pointing this out to my sister, who seemed unaware, prompted her to hurriedly check her phone. Seeing the call log, the color drained from her face. Realizing the situation was serious after seeing missed calls from the police as well, she said, "Oh. I just remembered I have something else to do. So, I'll be going." "Wait. Where do you think you're going?" As she tried to flee, our father grabbed her by the scruff of the neck to stop her. Caught by our father, my sister momentarily tried to struggle and resist but soon gave up and hung her head in resignation. Our parents have always been strict about manners and etiquette, and from a young age, my sister and I were brought up to be well disciplined. I am grateful to my parents for instilling in us the proper attitude and manners one should have as a person, but my sister seemed to struggle with such formalities and often disliked our parents for it, frequently escaping from their discipline. My parents, particularly my father, never overlooked such behavior from my sister, and I believe his attitude towards her was quite strict. Perhaps because of this, even as an adult, my sister still feels intimidated by our father. The sight of our family arguing as soon as my sister returned home, especially with my father catching her trying to flee, caused her friends to become uneasy. In front of them, our parents loudly scolded her for her mistreatment of her grandchildren, including this incident.
"How could you go on a trip leaving a 9-year-old and an infant behind? What were you thinking? You say Susan is responsible, but she's still a child. To dump the care of a baby on such a child. Are you even a mother? And it's not just this time, it seems you've left Susan alone to fend for herself many times before, without even preparing meals. Do you even realize you're a mother? If your husband is often away on business trips, it's all the more your responsibility to look after the home and children, isn't it?" As my parents revealed more about my sister's behavior, her friends were puzzled, asking, "What do you mean, and didn't you say you were leaving the kids with your parents?" However, witnessing the anger of our parents, the sheepishness of my sister, and the frightened look of my niece peeking out from behind us, they seemed to realize the truth in my parents' words. Now, everyone present was glaring at my sister. As if she couldn't stand the atmosphere, my sister continued to make excuses while trembling and turning pale. "It's not like that. I was told my husband was at home yesterday." "Lies. Then how do you explain everything up to now?"
That's. While this exchange was ongoing, the police arrived. "Excuse us, we are from Central Police Station." We received a report last night suggesting your daughters might be subjected to abuse. Could we discuss this matter in more detail? Oh, wait. Eventually, without much resistance, my sister was taken to the police station. After being taken in, my sister underwent questioning and, being her first offense, was released with just a stern warning. The person who appeared as my sister's guarantor was her husband. It seems our parents had contacted him last night, and he had rushed back from a business trip. While we were taking care of my niece and her siblings at my sister's house, waiting for their return, my sister and her visibly angry husband came back in the evening. Upon seeing her father, my niece joyfully hugged him.
Daddy! Welcome home!
Susan, I'm home. I'm sorry for making you feel lonely. I'm sorry. He hugged my niece tightly, as if making up for the lost time. After putting the children to bed, my husband and I, along with our parents and my sister and her husband, sat down for a serious discussion. When her husband demanded that she tell everything, my sister, still pale, looked down and made excuses, saying, I wanted a change of pace because of parenting stress.
Even though it seems like you're always hunting for brand name bags. It's the talk of the neighborhood, you know?
What? There was no way my sister was mentally exhausted from childcare. Convinced that she was lying, I shared information I had heard from my colleagues. I recounted not only this incident but also episodes of my sister doing as she pleased while her husband was away, as a form of retaliation for her past actions. Hearing this, her husband became furious. You've been doing such things while I was gone. To prove the truth of my accusations, a quick search of the house revealed a stash of brand name goods hidden in the back of my sister's closet. So, what Maple said is true. Faced with the evidence of the brand name goods, my sister nodded in resignation. According to her confession, she had lied to her husband about the children attending expensive lessons to receive a large sum of money. Moreover, she often neglected the children's care, not only when she was out but also when she was at home. I'm so disappointed in you.
You always said you were managing the housework and childcare properly.
Let's get a divorce. Having had enough of her, her husband declared his intention to divorce her. Having no excuses left for her misdeeds, my sister quietly accepted the divorce. She couldn't let go of her pride in their mansion, pleading with her husband, please leave the house to me. Her husband, who had no interest in the house, agreed to transfer it to her in exchange for a reduction in her share of the other assets. However, the story of what happened spread among the neighbors and her circle of friends, tarnishing her reputation as a woman who mistreated her children and was abandoned by her husband. No one was willing to help my sister. She faced scorn when she went shopping, was rejected when she tried to find part-time work in the neighborhood, and became completely isolated. Eventually, unable to step outside her home and mentally deteriorating, my sister sought help from our parents. However, they had disowned her at the time of her divorce and refused to have any involvement with her. Abandoned by everyone, my sister now lives miserably in the once prized mansion that has turned into a house of clutter. On the other hand, her husband had been seeking to change his work style for the sake of the family. He had applied for a transfer to a department without business trips, hoping to spend more time with his family, and it seemed likely his request would be granted soon. Deciding he couldn't leave the children with their mostly absent mother, he took custody. A decision our parents and I fully supported. The children, especially fond of their father, were thrilled to live with him, saying, "We get to live with Daddy." Without any allies, my sister was left despondent. After the divorce, my brother-in-law and the children moved close to our home. To fill the void of the past lack of interaction, my husband and I sometimes play with the children. Since the incident, the niece has become attached to us, and we occasionally look after her and her sibling when my brother-in-law works late.
The baby is growing up healthy and is at a very cute age. Watching the children grow up, we spend our days feeling happy and fulfilled.